Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the PT on Ice Daily Show. I am your host for today, Dr. Zach Long, lead faculty inside our fitness athlete division, teaching our live fitness athlete course as well as our advanced concepts course with Alan and Mitch. I'm excited to talk best day of the week on the podcast, Fitness Athlete Friday, where we get to talk about all things related to the fitness athlete. Today we're going to be talking specifically about strengthening the thoracic spine, the upper back, and we're going to talk about that both from a standpoint of performance as well as post mobility work for our patients that maybe are not CrossFitters, but what are some different exercises we can do to up our game there. The thoracic spine, upper back strength is not something that we talk a whole lot about outside of rows, prone, T's, Y's, things that work the muscles around the scapula, but far too often we ignore thoracic extension strength and its importance for individuals of all walks of life. So before we dive into that and talk about some of my favorite exercises for it, we do have a couple of courses coming up that we need to mention. So March 13th and 14th, I will be teaching clinical management of the fitness athlete live in Greenville, South Carolina. Excited to be back on the road teaching that course with Cody Gingrich helping me out that weekend. Then the following weekend, we got 3 courses around the country. So something in your neck of the woods is very likely the March 20th weekend. We will have our lumbar spine management course in Baton Rouge. I was just down there a few weeks ago with the Delta crew. What an awesome group of individuals down there. Justin Dunaway that same weekend will be in Nebraska teaching total spine thrust. And then we will also have our cervical spine management course in Olney, Maryland. So let's dive into today's topic, thoracic spine strengthening the upper back, working those thoracic extensors. And let's start with kind of what are the times that we really need to make sure that we're addressing the thoracic spine from a strength perspective. We'll start with kind of our bias on Fitness Athlete Friday, which is for the fitness athlete. When do we specifically look at something in their technique and identify that we really probably need to be biasing some thoracic spine strength? For me, what's most obvious, or the most obvious checkpoint for us knowing that we need to strengthen the thoracic spine is looking at somebody's front squat or their clean. So the front squat, because the bar is sitting on the front of the shoulders, really changes the center of gravity of the movement and is going to really increase the load on the upper back. In fact, for most individuals, if not all individuals, their front squat is not typically going to be limited by leg strength. Instead, it will be limited more by upper back strength, the strength of the thoracic spine extensors to keep the torso upright so that individual can sustain a good front rack position without dropping their chest down, which then will make it hard for them to stabilize a heavier load. So what we'll very commonly see in individuals that's thoracic spine isn't quite strong enough for the load that they're lifting is once they get up to those heavier loads, when they get to above 90% of their 1 rep max, it is their upper back rounding underneath that heavy load that results in them failing at a lift rather than being successful in that lift. So that's a huge indicator for me that thoracic spine strength needs to be something that we add to that person's accessory lifts. In general though, I'll say anytime I'm writing a performance-based program, I am adding some thoracic spine strength. When I'm looking at a general strength performance-based program, whether this is for powerlifters or accessory work for CrossFit athletes wanting to improve their maximal strength, thoracic spine strength is one of those key areas that is so commonly not thought of in this population from a performance perspective. We think about strengthening the quads and the glutes and the hamstrings. We think about strengthening the low back. We talk a lot in the PT on Ice podcast or in our fitness athlete courses on like the Sorensen hold test to look at somebody's lumbar spine endurance. But far too often we don't think about upper back strength, upper back thoracic extension strength. So it's in my programs really commonly. We'll get to some exercises for that in just a few minutes. The other time that I think we really need to prioritize thoracic spine extension strength is after any time we work on thoracic spine extension mobility. So I think, we're all kind of on board with the idea of once you do something to open up mobility, whether that's a manual technique or a stretch or like some sort of soft self-manual therapy technique, like somebody jumping on a foam roller and rolling out something for a period of time. We all understand that those things create temporary changes in somebody's mobility, and we know that we need to follow that up with active movement. But one area that I don't think we do that enough with is going to be the thoracic spine. Like when we mobilize somebody's thoracic spine because we think that's important for their neck pain or their shoulder pain or their low back pain, we need to follow that up with actually strengthening that area. When we follow it up with strengthening and loading, we're going to see that individual hold on to those mobility gains we get from doing those more passive things a little bit better. So if I have, if Jimmy's coming in and he's a CrossFitter dealing with some neck pain, maybe cervicogenic headaches, and I identify that some thoracic spine stiffness is probably limiting his performance some, but also maybe limiting to some alterations in his neck positioning to where he's getting a little bit more strain put on his neck. And I get him doing foam roller thoracic spine extensors every day as part of his home exercise program. I need to be following that up with active movement as well. And so often when we talk about active movement in individuals from a thoracic spine perspective, we kind of get stuck as PTs in like quadruped thoracic rotations and other lower level exercises like that are great for some active motion to work on that mobility a little bit, but we got to hit the other side of the equation. We got to get a little bit more intense with it and load it up as well to really work on improving some maximal strength in that area. So I'm going to take you through a progression of maybe 5 or 6 of my favorite exercises for this. I will say that I think like front squats and deadlifts and our big compound movements are obviously a lot of money when it comes to this. But for some people, when we maybe want to isolate that a little bit more, or maybe add some specific volume to the thoracic spine extensors, this is kind of where I go. And we're going to start pretty low level here with one of my favorite exercises for our more highly irritable patients. So let's take a cervicogenic headache, neck pain patient that comes into the clinic that isn't tolerating a whole lot of load right now. Like one of my favorite exercises to start that individual with is 90-90-Ys. I know following me for some of these exercises is going to be a little difficult if you're listening on the podcast, or even if you're listening live right now on Facebook or Instagram. I'm not demoing the exercises. So I'm going to go into the Facebook page after we get done here, and in the comments I'll put a link to a database of exercises that you can download, and you can go into the thoracic spine section and you'll see all of these exercises listed in there. So check that out on facebook.com/icephysio. Find this episode and you can download that stuff. But the first exercise for the highly irritable patient is typically for me going to be 90-90-Ys. So I've got an individual lying supine. We flex their knees and hips up to 90 degrees, and then their arms are reaching towards the sky. So almost like the same position that we would start in for like a dead bug exercise. Hips and knees flex to 90, shoulder flex to 90, and we have a large resistance band loop around the feet and held in the arms. And so in this position, the low back's kind of flattened down. I'll get that individual to chin tuck a little bit, retract a little bit. So with the low back flattened, the chin retracted, we're kind of pushing the thoracic spine into a little bit of extension, and then we raise our arms overhead into like a Y position. So that band is kind of resisting us going into the Y position. What you'll feel when you really dial in all of those components of the 90-90-Y exercise, that individual will actually feel like a little challenge to some of the deep neck flexors. They'll feel the thoracic spine extensor muscles working to kind of open the upper back up a little bit. Not terribly hard, very well tolerated by highly irritable patients, so a great way to start introducing loading from there. Once things kind of calm down a little bit, we want to get a little bit more aggressive in our exercise prescription. So I'd say probably the next spot that I very commonly go is some prone thoracic extensions. So I get that individual lying off the edge of a treatment table, a bench, or their bed. And we get like the bottom of their rib cage right on the edge of the bench, so that the thoracic spine and head and arms are hanging off the end of the bench. And they're actually flexed over the edge of the bench. So this hand, if you're watching me live, is the bench. My palm is the low back and legs. Then upper back and head's off the end of the bench. And what we simply do there is we work on actively extending through the thoracic spine while the glutes and abs are kind of engaged a little bit. So we're just isolating thoracic extension off the edge of a bench. We can go arms across chest, we can go hands behind head, we can go arms overhead, we can hold a little weight. A lot of different ways to progress that to make it more and more challenging, but a really easy setup to isolate those thoracic spine extensors. Those are really early on things for me. Typically after that, I want to get significantly more aggressive. And 2 exercises I really like to kind of bridge the gap between maximal strength and these lower level rehab exercises are going to be the goblet squat and press and sweat shrug. So the goblet squat and press, we take a really light kettlebell. I'm talking like 5 to 15 pounds. Like you're really strong, fit, CrossFit athlete won't need heavier than a 15 pounder for this one. But we squat down in a goblet squat, holding a little kettlebell out in front. Keep those elbows really narrow, and then while we're in the bottom of the squat, press that overhead. By holding narrow, keeping the elbows close and not letting them drift out as we go overhead, that's going to really tie the shoulder up. So it's going to make getting into a full overhead position really stiff for a lot of individuals. So what happens as they press up and they get to in range of shoulder flexion in that position, then the thoracic spine will work really hard to extend and get that even more overhead. They won't feel this work in the shoulder near as much as they'll feel like that upper back thoracic extensions is getting really, really challenged. And you'd be surprised. A 10-pound weight for 5 to 8 reps will have that upper back smoking pretty good. Great exercise. If you haven't tried that before and you're on the way into the clinic right now listening to the podcast, first thing you do when you walk in the clinic, set your bag down, go into the gym, grab a 10-pound plate, 10-pound kettlebell, and try out that goblet squat and press. Great exercise. Probably my most favorite out of everything we're going to talk about today is called the sweat shrug. Sweat, S-W-E-A-T-T shrug. I would definitely suggest looking at a video of this. Powerlifter Shane Sweat in Ohio kind of came up with this exercise. But imagine doing a Romanian deadlift where you hinge down until the barbell's right at your knee level. So maybe not fully hinged depending on your mobility, but we start with that flat back in the hinge position, and then we flex the head and begin to round the upper back. We round the upper back until it starts to get to the lumbar spine. Once the lumbar spine starts to become involved, we stop, keep the lumbar spine neutral, and then we re-extend the thoracic spine. Kind of think of a moving segment by segment, and then we add a little shoulder retraction at the very end of that motion there. It's going to do a great job of just building some awareness of thoracic spine mobility as well as some thoracic spine strength. I've been playing with this a lot for the last 6 months or so in the clinic, and it is a fantastic drill for building some strength in here. Beyond that, we can get to some of our more higher level strength stuff. So what do we do when we're really, really performance oriented with somebody and we want to really build maximal strength? So this is your CrossFitter that is no longer symptomatic in their neck pain, shoulder pain, whatever. But when they brought in a video of their front squat, you saw that as they got heavy, they really lost thoracic spine extension position. What do you want to have that individual do? Well, really the first thing you want to do is just have them spend more time in the front rack. And really any exercise where they're in the front rack is good. So let's do front squats. Let's do front rack step-ups. Let's do front rack lunges. Let's do front rack walks. Get the barbell in the front rack and have them spend time in that position. That's going to do a great job of building strength. I'm also a huge fan of Zercher squats. So Zercher squats are maybe my favorite squat variation to do, because for me personally, every time I program Zercher squats and train that motion consistently, I see my squat strength and my deadlift strength both jump up quite a bit. I'm somebody that is very weak in my thoracic spine extensors relative to other areas of my body. So focusing on that with Zercher squats really helps me out. The Zercher squats is a pretty brutal exercise though. So think of having your elbows bent to 90 degrees just slightly out in front of your body. With them bent to 90 degrees, you have that bend in your elbow. We're going to place the barbell in that bend of your elbow, which is a pretty sensitive area. Sometimes you'll need a towel or a foam pad or something to make that a little less sensitive. But we hold the barbell in the crook of the elbows, just in front of our stomach. And by placing it there, out in front of our body, that weight is really, really, really trying to round the thoracic spine forward. It's about as challenging of a squat variation as you can find on those thoracic spine extensors. Then perform some squats with that. It is a brutal exercise, a lot of fun to do though. So there's 6 different exercises that I think you can start incorporating with your patients, with your athletes to work on their thoracic spine extension strength, something that we overlooked far too commonly. Again, if you check out the Facebook page, I'll have a link to those videos in the facebook.com/icephysio page if you want to see some visuals of those exercises. Hope you all enjoyed this. Hope you have a great weekend and hope to see you on the road or in an online course really soon. Take care.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the PT on Ice Daily Show. If you enjoyed this content, head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. And be sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram at the Institute of Clinical Excellence. If you're interested in getting plugged into more ICE content on a weekly basis while earning CEUs from home, check out our virtual ICE online mentorship program at ptonice.com. While you're there, sign up for our Hump Day Hustling newsletter for a free email every Wednesday morning with our top 5 research articles and social media posts that we think are worth reading. Head over to ptonice.com and scroll to the bottom of the page to sign up.